Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me to join you today to talk about accessibility. I am an accessibility technology evangelist here at Microsoft and also a very heavy user of accessible technology and accessibility features. I joined the disability community about 8 years ago when I had an accident resulting in a spinal cord injury. So I'm now quadriplegic. So this is a topic that is very near and dear to my heart and something I'm quite passionate about. So let me share my screen here. So today what I'm going to do is talk through the Microsoft accessibility journey, how we got to where we are, how we measure accessibility, our journey as a business so that we can evaluate where we're doing well, where we have room for improvement. I'll talk about and give you some examples of how we've built accessibility into our products, and of course, heavily relying on AI. I'll talk about some new product features we introduced last week at our Ability Summit. And then I'll give you a couple of examples of innovations we've done with some of our customers. So please feel free to jump in with questions or comments along the way here. So let's start by talking about who we're talking about. We know that there are over 1 billion people, and actually I just saw an updated number that says there are 1.3 billion people in the world who have a disability. 1 in 10 of those people don't have access to the products and the technology that they need. And people with disabilities are 2 times as likely to be unemployed as people without disabilities. And that number hasn't really changed in the past 30 years. So we've got a lot of room for improvement there. A disability can affect any of us at any time. So I have a permanent disability, but you can have a temporary disability as well. If you break your arm, you have to figure out how to type with one hand while you're in a cast for 6 weeks. That's a temporary disability. And we're all going to age into disability. And I think oftentimes we don't really think about this, but as we get older, we may experience a reduction in vision or hearing, and that is a disability. So as we're thinking about building accessibility in for the disability community, keep in mind it's not the obvious disability community. It's going to be all of us at some point. I have a friend and colleague, Dave Dame, who says we're all going to age into disability. It's just some of us beat you to it. So at Microsoft, we view accessibility as a responsibility, but we also view it as an opportunity. In 2018, Accenture, Disability In, and AAPD did a study. They selected 45 companies who are known to be inclusive. They followed them for 4 years, and when compared with their peers, the inclusive companies generated 28% higher revenue, 2 times higher net income, and 30% higher margins. Forbes did a study that shows that by 2025, 75% of the workforce will be millennials. And when asked who they want to work for, they want to work for companies who share their values. And at the top of their list is diversity and inclusion. But accessibility is a journey. We're all on it as individuals, as companies, as organizations. So let me tell you a little bit about the Microsoft journey and how we got to where we are. So our accessibility journey started way back in the 90s when Bill Gates made a commitment to build accessibility into our products. And that's when we started our employee disability resource groups. In 94, we introduced our very first accessibility feature, which was sticky keys, still very much in use today. In 2012, we introduced our disability answer desk. And this is a free service available to anyone to call in. If you've got an issue with or question about any accessibility feature across any Microsoft product, you can reach out to our disability answer desk and they'll help troubleshoot or support you through the issue or address any questions that you have. In 2015, we revamped our corporate mission to empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. And by every person, we mean every person, regardless of ability. In 2016, we realized that we needed to really reassess and revamp our own accessibility initiatives. And so we created a Chief Accessibility Officer role that Jenny Leigh-Fleury stepped into. And we realized at that point that we needed to start measuring it. We needed to figure out a way to measure accessibility as a business to evaluate where we are on our own journey and how we can continue to improve. And then last year, we doubled down on bridging the disability divide. So we're more committed than ever to helping bridge that societal gap of inclusion for people with disabilities in education, in employment, and in access to technology. So at Microsoft, accessibility isn't just something we talk about. It really is who we are throughout our entire organization. It's part of our DNA. And we see that in our people, in the systems that we've implemented, and in our products and our future. Our people, we focus on working with organizations who recruit people with disabilities, and we have our own neurodiversity hiring program so that we always have people with disabilities in our talent pipeline. As I mentioned, we put systems into place to measure our own accessibility journey. I'll talk about that more in just a few minutes. We build accessibility into our products during the design phase. We have accessibility champions across each product team to make sure that we're building that in early on in the product development lifecycle. And we're always looking to the future to figure out how we can innovate and continue to build more and more features into our products. So we have a hub and spoke model. So I sit on the central accessibility team there in the middle. But as I said, we have accessibility champions throughout the entire organization. On each of our product teams, we have accessibility architects in our marketing so that we're representing the entire community across race, gender, age, disability, etc. Within our sales organizations, we have people who are accessibility experts who can assist in those conversations with our customers. In our research group, of course, AI is what everyone's talking about right now, AI. We're all continually looking at how we can leverage AI to support the disability community. In 2016, when we realized, that we really wanted to measure our performance with regard to accessibility, we took a look at a couple of maturity models from Carnegie Mellon and Level Access, and we leveraged best practices from them to create our own accessibility evolution model. So every year, we evaluate each part of the organization in our hub and spoke model, and we measure them across 8 different criteria to identify where we're doing well, what we can leverage from those best practices, and where we still have room to improve. So those are some of the systems that we have in place here at Microsoft. And before I jump into some of our product examples and accessibility features within our products, I want to spend a few minutes talking about inclusive design, because I think this is critically important, especially as you're starting out with new ideas and new products and new businesses. It's really important to as designers, developers, our ideas come from our own lived experiences and our own perspectives, and they're heavily influenced by our conscious and our unconscious biases. And that's why it's really important to early on in your development life cycle to bring in people with diverse perspectives, to hear from others, because if you're only building from your perspective, you're building for a very small subset of people who are just like you. And you're excluding a lot of other people, not only people with disabilities, but people of different races, genders, ages, etc. So 2 points I want to make here. One, don't take a build it and they will come approach to developing. That only works in baseball movies. And 2, don't make assumptions about what people with disabilities need. If testing, putting on a blindfold and testing with a screen reader is not the same experience as relying on a screen reader 100% of the time. So reach out, ask questions, find people in the community who can provide feedback from their own lived experience as a blind person, a deaf person, someone like me with a mobility issue. And why is this important? I mean, beyond accessibility being the right thing to do, and in a lot of countries mandated by regulations, it makes business sense. So there's no reason you wouldn't want to open up your product to the widest market possible. And here's a fun fact. People with disabilities have an annual disposable income of $1.9 trillion. That's a big market to exclude simply because your products aren't accessible to everyone. So at Microsoft, these are the inclusive design principles that we adhere to. Start with recognizing exclusion. So educate yourself on the disability community, disability history, disability rights. to start understanding what some of the challenges are for that community. You network with people who have disabilities, attend events, and join organizations to start gaining that perspective. I mean, ideally, as you're hiring, you're starting your business, as you're hiring people with a wide range of, abilities and characteristics. So you're bringing that in. But I know early on that's very difficult to do. So, educating yourself and immersing yourself in the disability community can help you start recognizing where those exclusions might lie. And then again, learn from from diversity, learn from people with disabilities. Um, Educate yourself on design principles like WCAG standards. And by doing so, you're going to solve for one, you're going to solve for people in the disability community, but everyone benefits. We call it build for one, extend to many. We don't build for the disability community, we build with the disability community. And by doing so, everyone benefits. And I'll give you a couple examples of those. Okay, so let me jump into some of our product features. So these are just some examples of features that we have built into our own products. And these are specific to M365. As we build, we think about disability in these 6 categories: vision, hearing, mobility, neurodiversity, learning, and mental health. And I'll highlight just a couple of these. So for example, we have a color filter feature in Windows that enables you to set color filters for your entire desktop. Beneficial to people who are just sensitive to color and need a more muted palette. Also beneficial to people who are colorblind, which is 1 in 12 men. Um, PowerPoint Designer is a really cool feature that I use frequently. So because of my level of paralysis, I don't have any hand function at all. So clearly my dexterity is poor and I can't spend a lot of time making PowerPoint slides pretty, simply because I just can't navigate as well. PowerPoint Designer leverages AI to create design ideas for you. So as you start building content in to your slides, it's consuming that content and creating a design that aligns with the content. It gives you lots of different options to choose from. It's a lifesaver for me or for other people with mobility issues, but I also think it benefits everyone. Who wants to spend time creating pretty squares and circles on a slide? You want to spend your time focusing on the content. So I think that's a great example of how we've leveraged AI in our products. Something we introduced in Windows 11 is Focus Assist. We built this for the neurodiversity community, but it's something that I use all the time. And it allows you to set a time period. Let's say for the next hour, I'm going to be working on a PowerPoint presentation. It mutes all of your notifications, anything that flashes in your system tray. And if you have a Spotify account, you can actually link to your Spotify account. So when you start a focus session, it will start your focus playlist for you. So those are just a couple of examples of how we are continually improving and building features into our own products. Some other cool products that I like to highlight, of course, I think we're probably all familiar with the Xbox Adaptive Controller, which we introduced several years ago. But last October, we introduced the Microsoft Adaptive Accessories. These are phenomenal for people with mobility disabilities. So it consists of a hub, an adaptive mouse, and 3 different button types. We've also partnered with a company called Shapeways who build custom 3D printed adaptations for the accessories. And they allow you to program touch points. So for example, I have a D-pad. It has 8 different touch points that I can program to do things like hold down 3 concurrent keys, which I can't physically do with my own hands. So if I want to do Control Alt Delete, I can program one of my touchpad points to do that. I can also create a macro. So for example, voice access, which allows me to navigate my computer and convert speech to text using my voice. I can create a macro that will open my settings, select voice access, and toggle it on. So these are really great features for people with mobility disabilities. Accessibility Insights is another one that I think will be important to you. This is a website tester. It's a browser plugin available in Chrome and Edge, and it will test your website for accessibility issues. So anything that doesn't adhere to a WCAG standard, it will highlight that issue for you. It will give you the code snippet, and it will tell you how to fix it. And just a couple of other interesting product examples and the people behind them. So the top left, that's Chris. Chris is deaf. He is the accessibility architect on our Teams team. He uses sign language and he has interpreters who join him on all of his calls. So he was the brilliant mind behind our sign language view that we introduced, I think in November last year. Excuse me. And what sign language view allows him to do or enables anyone to do is if you have a sign language interpreter that joins you on your calls, you can specify who that person is in your Teams setting. So anytime that person joins you on a call, they're automatically pinned in the top left corner of your screen in a larger high resolution window. And so how that helps is anytime Chris joins a call, he's not searching for his interpreter who's maybe off the screen because 40 people are on the call and trying to pin her, every time he joins a call. So that's just automatically done in his settings. The top right is John. John has muscular dystrophy, and he helped us develop voice access, which I just mentioned. Voice access builds on speech recognition. So it's the Windows 11 version of speech recognition. And again, it allows people to navigate through their computer and convert speech to text using just their voice. The bottom picture is Sweta. She is an Azure engineer, and she is who developed Blur. So she's deaf, but she reads lips. And so when she would join video calls with her family or her friends, she'd ask them to dim the lights behind her or behind them so that she could more easily focus on their face and their lips as she's reading lips. So she brought this idea forth in a hackathon, actually, and it became Blur. And this is a great example of build for one, extend to many. We built this with the deaf community, but everyone benefits from it. You'll see I'm using Blur behind me today, and I think so many of us use it not because we're speaking with someone who needs it to read our lips, but because we don't want people to see how messy our offices are behind us. These are some of the cool new features that we introduced last week during our Ability Summit. And our timing is just unfortunate because Satya Nadella, our CEO, and our CVP of product are, as we are on this call, they're announcing some new features that are coming out that leverage AI. So I'm going to put that link in the chat so that you'll have it. So we'll all have to jump over to that and tune in to see what those announcements are, because I don't even know what they are, I would tell you. But one of the cool features that we're going to introduce is M365 Accessibility Assistant. So today, if you're working in a Word document, you've got spell checker on. So as you're going along and you type a word that it isn't spelled correctly, it highlights it for you. Or if your grammar could be improved, it highlights that. Accessibility Assistant is going to work exactly the same way, but for accessibility issues. So for example, if you put yellow font on a white background, it's going to flag that as a color contrast issue. It'll put up a little accessibility icon, which you can click on. It will tell you that you've got a color contrast issue that needs to be corrected, and it's going to display a color palette with options for you that do adhere to color contrast WCAG standards. So I'm really looking forward to that. We have customers all the time that ask us if we can force accessibility checker to be on all the time, and we've never been able to do that in the past. But this will give anyone the option to turn that on to be aware as you're working about what your accessibility issues might be. In Power Platform, if you're not familiar, is our platform where you can build apps. And if you're building apps in Power Platform and you're using the features out of the box, they are accessible by design. But what Power Apps Ideas will do is if you're building an app, it will recognize what kind of app or anticipate what you're trying to do. So for example, if you start building an app that lists out events that people can register for, it will say, hey, it looks like you're building an events app. Here are some widgets that you might find useful, and it will provide you the code that you could just plug right into your app. Power Automate is another really cool feature. This is our workflow engine. It allows you just to build workflows. What we're adding to it is called Describe It to Design It. So for example, I can tell Power Automate, or I will be able to tell Power Automate, I want to build a workflow that notifies the specific team channel at 2 o'clock on Fridays to remind everyone to submit their weekly report. It will create that workflow for you just from the natural language description you provided, enable you to test it, and then push it out to production to run every week. GitHub Copilot, we are introducing code from comments. So I can literally just type a comment that says, regex for phone number validation, and it's going to type out that code for me. We also have an explain code feature that's coming where I can grab a code snippet and ask it to explain the code, and it's going to tell me what that code is trying to do. Translate code. So for example, if I've written my code in JavaScript and I want to convert it to Python, it will do it for me. And then, hey, GitHub. This is still just an innovation that we're working on, but it does exactly what you think it does. Hey, GitHub, write code that does whatever I want the code to do. And I love these features. I wish they'd been around when I was writing code. My code would have been much cleaner and much better. Cognitive services. So I'm sure that everyone on the call has played with ChatGPT. And we're building that GPT capability into our cognitive services to do things like summarizing text, generating text, and then this is a really cool thing. We'll be able to transcribe or create a summary from a Teams transcript complete with action items. So I look forward to that feature as someone who finds it difficult to take notes as we're going along through the meeting. That's something I'm looking forward to testing out. And then, as I mentioned, we're always looking to the future to try to stay ahead of these innovations that are happening in the world and in the market to leverage them for the disability community. So every year we have a 3-day hackathon, and as part of the hackathon, we have an ability hack. And we bring people in who are trying to build new features for the disability community. We started this in 2014 with 10 product ideas. This past year, we had 180 projects in our Ability Hackathon. And as I mentioned, Blur came out of a hackathon. So did the adaptive accessories. So we have a designer in the Netherlands whose daughter has cerebral palsy, and she struggled to interact with her computer due to some limited hand function. So he came up with all these ideas, brought them to a hackathon, and here we are rolling it out to the world. We also have an inclusive tech lab on our Redmond campus. It's an inclusive facility, but we're also working to build inclusion into our products through this tech lab. It started out as the Xbox controller lab. We expanded it to Surface, and now it includes all of our products. So we bring people in from the disability community, and we watch them interact with the products, and we get their feedback on what works and what doesn't, and what new ideas they have. People with disabilities are super creative because we have to be to get through life. So it's the best way to get that feedback that we can feed directly back into our product teams. But we can't do all of this alone as a Microsoft entity. So we work a lot with our customers to innovate and to help them build accessibility into their own products. So I'll give you a couple of examples. Peloton's the first one. Who didn't buy Peloton during the pandemic? Which was great, unless you couldn't hear the instructor. So if you're deaf or hard of hearing and you can't hear what the instructor is telling you, that's restricting your ability to enjoy a full experience on your Peloton. So we worked with them to leverage cognitive services to convert text to speech and to add translation services. So if the instructor is giving instruction in English and your first language is Spanish, you can turn on translations. Another example that we just introduced last year was Haleon. So Haleon is a healthcare company based in the UK. They own products like Centrum and Advil and Sensodyne. And their tag is always read the label. Once again, great if you can read the label. But if you're blind, low vision, low literacy, and you can't read that label, then again, you're being excluded from a full experience. Microsoft has an app called Seeing AI that we built for the blind and low vision community. And when you turn on the Seeing AI app, it can tell you what's in a room. It can tell you if your friends are in a room. It can read text on a sign. So it has a lot of different functions available. But what Haleon did and what we worked with them to do is to input 1,500 of their products into the Seeing AI app. So if I'm a blind user, I go into a store, I hold my phone up, I scan the barcode, it's going to read me all of the relevant product information for that product. So again, just some resources that you'll have available to you, the Disability Answer Desk, which we talked about, and then I've provided some links in here, and I'm going to pop some other links into the chat for our Microsoft Inclusive Design Toolkit that I think you'll find useful. I'll also plug in the WCAG standards list, and then we've got a lot of learning. We've got a ton of learning materials on learn.microsoft.com, but I'll throw some in the chat that I think might be more relevant for you. And then one of the key learnings is our accessibility fundamentals training course. So internally at Microsoft, when you join Microsoft, accessibility training is mandatory. So it's one of the first training courses that you take. And many of our customers asked us to make this public. So we created the accessibility fundamentals course. And so again, this is just a great way to start familiarizing yourself with accessibility, why it's important, and how to build for it. So that is all the material I had. What questions do you have or comments do you have?
That was really interesting, Laurie. I was surprised to hear that the PowerPoint designer was originally designed out for accessibility needs, and something I use all the time. But yeah, it hadn't crossed my mind that that would be very helpful for people with mobility issues.
It's a game changer. And it's so interesting. I didn't have it in this deck, but I have a slide that where I show the features that I use that are directly related to my disability and the features that I use just because they make me more productive. Like sometimes if I'm reading some really long, boring document, I turn on Immersive Reader just to improve my reading comprehension, or I'll leverage Read Aloud so that I am reading and hearing it at the same time. Same thing with captions. I use captions all the time if I'm on a call with someone who has an accent that I'm struggling to understand, or if I'm in a coffee shop and I'm watching a training video, I can't turn the volume up. So there's lots of features that we use that we don't think about that we're benefiting from, that were designed with the disability community.
Yeah, absolutely. Marco in the chat says, excellent presentation, the potential of accessibility and how tech solutions can help build a better community. So just a nice comment there. And Tyler says, I missed what the product was that can be used to scan web pages to ensure accessibility.
That's called Accessibility Insights, and I will shoot the link to you as well.
Great. And one other question came in, are there any accessibility features or measures that can improve the experience of users struggling with mental health disabilities?
Yes, so we have a few actually that I'll highlight. One is called Nightlight, and you can set it on a timer. So, let's say you're getting to the end of your day, it's 5 o'clock, you need to signal to yourself that it may be time to shut down my computer, think about, closing out for the day. It will dim and take all the blue light out of your screen. And it's just kind of a signal to, okay, maybe it's time to take a break for the evening. And then Focus Assist that I mentioned is also one that we built with mental health in mind. So again, it just allows you to focus on one task so you're not distracted by all of the pings you're getting on Teams or emails popping up, which can be very anxiety provoking. We have an option to simplify and personalize windows, and I will actually, again, let me put this link in the chat. But one of the features is the ability to simplify and personalize windows. And again, it's just to reduce some of those distractions that can be anxiety provoking. But that's, well, let's think about, that's a link that addresses exactly that. So that will give you a lot of options around tools for mental health.
Yeah, I do have one question. I'm sorry because the noise, but I want to ask, all of these technologies and the solution we can provide to the people that buy, different abilities, the challenge, in my opinion, is also related to the market, right? Why? Because the funding in these cases will be more difficult to get based on the customer needs, right? I mean, you're creating a product, a technical solution, but then the challenge is how to survive. I mean, how to survive in the market, in a saturated market. I mean, ideas, solutions, the technology is there. Microsoft has, many ways to promote innovation, to help different group of people, like they're targeting different and diverse groups. However, in my opinion, it's difficult to overcome these challenges when it gets to funding and being profitable at the same time, right? What do you think about this?
Yeah, we get that feedback a lot, and I will tell you, it's less expensive to build accessibility in from the beginning than it is to have to remediate at the end. No developer wants to have to remediate their code. It's annoying and it's expensive, and especially as regulations are increasing across countries. Accessible Canada Act coming. If you have to remediate at the end, oftentimes you'll find yourself having to bring in contractors who are expensive, and now you're up against a deadline trying to make your product accessible. But if you're thinking about it during the design phase and building it in from the beginning, it's less expensive to do that. And I know it sounds overwhelming, but I feel like when developers are familiar with these standards, with WCAG standards, for example, it just becomes muscle memory. So they develop that accessibility muscle memory, and so they're building it in. And if you're leveraging things like, GitHub Copilot, it's going to build accessibility in as well. So, I think the more and more we're building tools like our Power Apps tools, and again, I know, people are using other, methods to develop in other languages and things like that. And we have a lot of training, again, around that on Microsoft Learn. But I do think, you need to think about what the cost would be to have to remediate at the end and weigh that when you're thinking about having to spend the time building it in the beginning.
Okay, thanks for that answer. Yeah, I mean, we might have excellent ideas, and then we might also help the community. However, the challenging part is, get the fundings to get to be in the market, to survive in the market, and to provide more solutions to help more people. So that's why I ask. And thanks for your answer.
Yeah, that's a great question.
And I think also with that question, Microsoft might have additional resources. I'm not sure, Monica, if the Founders Hub applies here, but I think that Microsoft does have different resources that you can use to support startups.
Yeah, of course. I can put a link down below for the Founders Hub. And earlier in this challenge, we also had a workshop with the League of Innovators as well too, to provide that perspective. And if you're still connected to your mentors, I think they're also a great person to ask in terms of how to ensure success of your product in the market. So I'll link down those resources below. But thank you so much for your question, Marco.
Oh, thank you very much, Monica. I mean, we enjoyed this challenge as we are participating.
That's
I
amazing.
mean, yes, we are enjoying it, and now we are, eager to learn more about Microsoft accessibility technologies, right? So, but also we want to be sustainable in the market, right? I'm like thinking about in the future. So I know I'm talking too much, but I'm just
No.
curious. So yeah, we want to build a better community with technology,
Yeah.
but also being, having these sources of funding to be able to do this, right?
Yeah.
So that's the point. And thanks again for the presentation and your time.
Thanks, Marco.
Okay, I think we will wrap things up then and say goodbye. Thank you so much, Laurie. This was super helpful, and I'm very glad you made the time to join us today to share
Thanks,
your
Haley.
experiences and about Microsoft.
Thank you, and thanks for this opportunity, and please don't hesitate to reach out with any additional questions that come up.
Thank you
All
so
right,
much,
great.
Laurie.
Thanks, Monica. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Have a
Have a
great
great
day,
rest of
everyone.
your day.